Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Jordan McCracken-Foster, and I'm one of the teaching artists here at Art Prof. And I'm here today with fellow teaching artist Alex Rowe and the one and only Prof Lieu. And today, what we're going to be talking about is dealing with art block. So it's going to be really interesting today. I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation. And if you want to turn your artistic weakness into your strength, then you want to check out our website, or we have free tutorials and critiques for you guys to check out. So first question I have for Alex today is, can you define art block for us, for everyone else?
Yeah, it's like you hit a wall creatively. It feels like you can't access the creativity you have. You can't come up with new ideas. You can't finish existing ones. You just kind of hit a dead end.
Right. And how do you think that's something that a lot of artists struggle with, or is it just something that that one artist will seems to deal with that very often? What do you think?
I think that it comes, my thought on it is it comes when you need to take a break. I think it's like your mind telling you, time to go take a walk, time to do other things, time to freshen it up a little bit.
Yeah, for me, I've been through certain situations where I have this, this big project, and there's this deadline, and just when I need to create something awesome, my brain says, "No, how about we not come up with something creative? Let's do something really cliche, and all
Yeah.
the terrible ideas you have will come out first, and you're not going to come up with something until like 2 o'clock in the morning." That's all. I don't know. What do you think, Clara? Did artist block ever hit you?
I'm strange in that I really only remember one instance of having mega artist block. I mean, like complete paralysis creatively. It was very dramatic. Most of the time, I don't get it, but I had this one time I was working on these sculptures, and I was very excited to be doing sculpture because I hadn't done it for a while. And I struggled with this sculpture project for over 2 months. It drove me insane. Like, I had never had a project give me that much trouble before. And I think it comes in different versions. Like, sometimes it's just one day. I can't figure it out. And then the next day you move on. This was 2 months of not knowing what to do. I mean, Alex, do you experience it on a smaller basis or on a more intense basis?
Yeah, for me, I separate it of if it's more intense basis for me, then it's usually something else going on. Um, it makes sense for me to make art block what I call it when it's a short-term problem. It usually comes at the beginning of a project. When I got like first commission piece in a while, it was sketch time, and I just looked at a blank page and I was like, I got nothing.
So for you, it's the beginning of a project?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's always that point when you're thinking of a concept or how can I creatively put my own spin on this? And yeah, that's when I come up with nothing. And then,
well, so
like
Jordan,
for
you, Jordan, is art block more the thinking, or is it the physical drawing part?
It's usually always the thinking process, because in my opinion, that's what's most difficult. If I know how to draw a hand, I can draw a hand whenever I feel like it. That's not really the issue. It's like Alex said, it's that, how do you be creative? How do you create something brand new, or take an old idea and spin it to make it your own? And how do you make it interesting and fit with the prompt or the assignment or whatever it is, and hit it by the deadline? So there's a lot to think about there. And I think that I'm not sure if I can pinpoint exactly what I struggle with, if it's the deadline coming up, or if it's just maybe I'm not as interested in the idea, or maybe I don't trust myself as an artist, or what it is. But when it does come, it's always challenging for sure.
Mhm.
We have a comment here from Luna Moon. They're saying art block is basically my mind telling me that I'm overwhelmed and I need to take care of myself. That's a really good way of looking at it, because actually, I do think that one of the strategies that I tell people to do is just to go do something else for a little while. Go mop the kitchen floor that you haven't mopped in a long time. Just get your mind off of it somehow, because I do think that sometimes you just feel like a hamster on a wheel, that you're just spinning and spinning and not really going anywhere. And by sitting there and just bothering yourself more, it gets worse. Like, have you ever done that, Alex, where you're upset about the art block, but then by thinking about it, you're more upset about the art block? I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, especially it comes for me not when I'm making personal work. It's almost like art block has that negative connotation. So if I can't think of a concept for a personal piece, I'm just enjoying that creative process. But for a client piece, I feel like I have to have an idea like yesterday. Why can't I think of something? And then, of course, when you focus on it, it doesn't work out.
Well, let's talk about deadlines, because it's one thing to do a personal piece where your timeline's whatever you want it to be. It's another thing when you have a really concrete deadline and you're getting paid for something. Like, Jordan, does that affect you knowing that there's a deadline or not?
Honestly, no, not really, because this is something I mostly fought art block while I was in undergrad, but since grad school, I've kind of learned how to break out of it, especially because I do not have time to deal with art block. Like, it's just, when you have all these responsibilities, when you have a job, when you have to check in on family, when you have to get your assignments done, you don't have time for things like that. So when I have to deal with deadlines, it's more, it actually, it forces me to go with a decision faster, whether it's good or bad. And there's been a lot of bad ones, and I end up learning a lot from that. But I never, I can never really sit there for that long, be inactive about something. Like, it's not coming to my head. It's like, nope, I don't care. You have to do your assignment. You have to do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. I had an old roommate who I loved living with him because I was doing art, of course, and he worked in finance. And so we were just two opposite sides. And he would always say when I had artist block of just don't let perfect get in the way of good. Like, yeah, you could spend another 24 hours just racking your brain, pulling your hair out over why you can't think of a perfect concept. Sometimes you just have to execute the one you have.
Well, that makes me wonder if the art block is not so much that we don't have ideas, but that we think the ideas we have aren't good enough, and that perfectionism keeps us from going ahead. Because I do think that being a perfectionist, it can be very paralyzing. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard that term, done is better than perfect. Because if you strive for perfectionism, you're going to be really upset all the time. And I think, Jordan, it's sort of like what you said, where it's like, it's got to get done. So you sort of throw your hands up and say, okay, I give up on being perfect, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So the question is, Jordan, how do you do that? How do you say, you know what, I can't make it perfect? How do you accept that? Because that's not easy for a lot of people to accept.
What I find is, the more artwork I create, the less precious I am with each and every piece. Because I find that when people draw less or paint less or sculpt less or whatever, you have a very small library of work, and each one becomes really precious. And so when you start doing hundreds of sketches, you can whip one out really quickly. It's just another sketch. It's just another drawing. And so that actually helped me a lot, because I realized, it's not super precious. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. They might not be happy with it. I tried. And sometimes what often happens is, if they're disappointed in the product, whether it's a teacher or a client or whatever, then sometimes their feedback will often steer me in the direction that really works. And, I've dealt with that several times over the course of my, grad school and professional career. I don't know, Alex, what do you think? Have you ever dealt with is there a specific instance you can think of where the art block has just hit you so hard and you're just really trying to figure all this stuff out? Like, for
yeah, it's always when the project is more intimidating than not. And I think what you said speaks to that perfectly. Of if you just practice more and more, then you'll have that skill to face the opportunity when it happens. For me, it was specifically right after graduating. I was working on a tarot deck series, and I keep going back to it. But yeah, it was just debilitating when I started, because it was such a broad, big concept, and I didn't know how to attract it from my angle.
Well, I also think sometimes the concept is so big that it's intimidating, and then people just don't know where to get started. because I had a friend like that. She was so gifted and was such a brilliant artist, but she could never wrap her head around actually breaking down a larger concept into concrete actions. And that's where she would just hit that wall and couldn't go forward. And so I think some of it is being able to think on a big scale, but also on a day-to-day, like, okay, what am I going to do tomorrow for this project? I mean, Jordan, you just came off of a really long project you worked on in grad school, Shadow Boxers, and you did have this whole world, but then it's like, okay, today I'm working on this character's shoe. Like, how do you break that down?
Yeah, well, part of it is, I have to figure out a process in my head. And so, for those who don't know, my project started off when I was in high school, and I stopped for a few years because I had this mental block. And part of it was just the wanting it to be perfect. But when you want perfection, oftentimes what happens is you end up not doing anything because you have all these ideas in your mind. You're like, what if this was cool? What if this was cool? And you overwhelm your mind so much, and you almost trick yourself into thinking you're doing more work when you're actually not. And so I wasn't actually drawing anything. And so bringing it back to my, now when I was working on it in grad school, I would have to focus on one issue at a time. I would have to say, okay, this is this character. Let's gather reference for this character. Let's write them up. Let's figure out their quirks, their likes, dislikes, their backstory, all the things that would have to do with that. And I would just spend weeks just figuring that out. And there were there was one time I was working on a character's face, and it was digital, and I lassoed out or selected out like the eye, and I would just move the arrow keys like to the left like a bunch, and then I move it up, and I was like, I gotta get it right, and I did that for like 5 minutes, and so I wanted to be so perfect, but there are times where I just have to move on. Sometimes it's just not going to be perfect, and you have to accept that as an artist. Everyone struggles with that, even music artists, performers, actors, whatever. They all struggle with that sort of thing.
We have a question here from Zagiro14. How do you stop art block that lasts for 3 months? Wow, that's intense. Alex, what would you do? 3 months have passed by. That's pretty upsetting for a lot of artists for that to be the case.
Yeah. And maybe this is just how my brain works around it, but I think of art block as like a short thing, never lasting more than a day or two. And when it gets like longer than that, because for me, I just took I called that an art hiatus, where I took several months off. I didn't touch a paintbrush, didn't touch a pencil. I just had to really navigate what art was for me. And so I would say if you're in a stretch that long, don't rush it. Don't push yourself back. The same rules that Jordan was saying apply. Don't force yourself to go back into it, but start examining what was your method? How do you want to go back into it? What do you want your stories to really look like? And I think a solution to get out of it, if it's that long, is to look at different medium, different ways of executing, different types of art that you can make.
I would also say it's okay to take a break. It really is. I mean, Luna Moon here is saying, I had art block for 3 years. It's possible to break the cycle. You just have to start slowly. Now, this happened to me, and I don't know that it was so much art block as much as it is just being burnt out. Because in 2014, I made the mistake of doing this. Never do this. I had 2 simultaneous solo exhibitions the same month, and I just collapsed after that. And I was so depressed because I felt like I busted my butt so hard for those shows, and I didn't feel afterwards that a lot changed for me other than another line on my resume, which feels terrible. You're just like, great, I got another line on my resume. That's it. I was so depressed that I was like, you know what? I don't want to do any studio work until it's fun again, because it wasn't fun working on those shows. It was so stressful. And I'm not kidding. I did not make work for 2 years. I focused on art prof. I was doing all the logistical stuff of that. Did I feel guilty about it? A little, but then I was like, it's okay. Like, Jordan, I'm sure you've taken a break at some point, like maybe after graduation or in the summers. Like, I have college students who are so upset in the summers because they're not as productive as they are during the year. I'm like, dude, take a break. It's okay.
Yeah. The break that lasts for months, that hasn't happened in a few years for me, to be honest. But there were several times where, there were a couple of weeks or a couple of months where I just wasn't feeling it. And that was at a time where I was deciding if I wanted to continue with art in general, because I was just going through a really rough time. And for me to break out of it, the thing that helped me was that I started to watch the things that I enjoyed. So if it was a TV show or a movie, we were joking before the stream about how much I love Marvel movies and stuff like that. Sometimes you just got to put on some Spider-Man or some Black Panther and just chill for an hour or two. Sometimes you have to, sometimes just ingesting the things that you enjoy. Like maybe you're into, I don't know, Shakespeare plays or something. I don't know. You read one of those and it inspires you to create something new. And I think oftentimes what happens is we deal with artist block when we feel depleted in terms of inspiration. And not to say that lack of inspiration is an excuse to not make art, but sometimes you just need to refresh yourself and just allow yourself to be reinvited into this world or reintroduced to this world.
We have a question from Neil. How do you know when to take risks or when to stop being such a perfectionist? Sometimes I feel like I'm not learning when I settle for mediocre stuff. What do you think, Alex?
I think that if you think that you're not learning from it, that in itself is teaching you something. Because I've had paintings like that where I'll spend hours and days on it, finish it, and just be like, well, I'm no better an artist than when I started that. And that act alone, it's like, cool, then that shows you work more on sketches, work more on thumbnail studies, work more on technique and execution, or spend more time thinking of concept.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I do, I just switch media. Let's say I'm working on a drawing project and the drawings are driving me up the wall, which they always do. I feel lucky that I do work in a lot of media. And some days I'm like, screw this drawing. I'm just going to play with this lump of clay. Like, it's fine. It's like an artistic vacation, right? It's like, you're supposed to be working at things and you're like, la, 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 I'm a sculptor for a day. This is great, and it's like no pressure because while I do sculpture, I don't think about myself as a sculptor. So when I sit down and I play with a lump of clay, there's no pressure there. Whereas I feel like with drawing, there is pressure because that is supposed to be my thing. And so sometimes it's just making a space for playtime can be really important. And playtime could be an hour, it could be a week, or you could say, you know what, for the next 3 months, it's playtime. And I'm not going to try to make anything good. I mean, Jordan, do you feel like knowing ahead of time if you're trying to make something finished is important, or specifically it's not supposed to be finished? Or does it not matter to you? I don't know. It depends on the artist, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the type of project that I'm doing. So there are times where it's like a client work and you can't get out of not having something finished because they're paying you for it. But when it's something more personal, I try to just make it all practice. And then if I'm inspired enough to finish it, then I'll turn into something more. So like today, for example, I was working on some expressions for one of my characters, and I'm just doing them all sketchy right now. I'm doing like 8 to 10 and just trying to learn how to draw my own character. And it's a lot of fun, but there are times where I'm like, that face looks creepy. You got to go or delete, And then there are times when I'm like, this one looks pretty interesting. And so what I'm doing is I'm drawing them in like 10 minutes, and then I take a break, look at them again. I'm like, you know what, let's keep going with this one. And then I'll finish it and do a whole thing. But it really depends. I can't really say that I plan it so much all the time.
We have a comment from Luna Moon. Do any of you have tips on finishing projects? I have a horrible time staying on track and finishing anything. Yeah, that's hard for everybody. What do you do, Alex?
I actually I'm just recently found a method of doing it that works for me. Because I started like a personal comic project that was so hard for me to sink my teeth into because I didn't see the small scale. I just saw this big thing that I had to tackle, like Jordan was talking about before. And setting those small goals for yourself, like keeping it fun, being like, okay, I'm just doing 1 page now. And that's the best way to keep going forward for me, is to do it one small step at a time.
Yeah, because if you start thinking about, what about page 32? What am I going to do? Like, you can't do everything all at once. Nobody is capable of doing that.
Yeah, and it's the same exact wheelhouse for like a single painting you have to finish. Like Jordan was saying earlier, of, I'm just going to do this character. I'm just going to examine this character. You just focus until you complete the project for it.
I will say also, though, a common problem that I see working with students, most students I work with give up far too soon. And I've had so many situations where students bring me a drawing and they're like, oh, I'm done. I don't want to ruin it. And I'm like, it's not finished yet. They're like, yeah, but if I work on it more, I could end up sacrificing the whole thing and then it's not worth it anymore. And so it's hard because I understand that impulse. Like, you want to preserve what you've done well. At the same time, though, I look at these drawings, I'm like, no, this is not done yet. So it can be very hard to figure out when to stop. Like, I always tell students, do too much. Do that a couple times. You can pull yourself back and always make another piece. Like, Jordan, what you said about productivity is so important. Like, Jordan, if you draw one drawing of a head, you're like, no problem. Like, you probably just toss it aside because you have like stacks of head drawings, right?
Yeah, that's true. Like figure drawing especially. I have so many of those that I'm just like, oh, whatever, it's a bad drawing. Gets tossed in the pile.
We have a comment from Haley Michelle. I finished my first semester in university for art. I did so much work while in school, but after it was over, I became very discouraged. How can I combat that? Alex, some thoughts about that?
That's such a good question to ask yourself and to look at. Because, yeah, Clara, you mentioned that before of how bad students feel in the summertime. Or I went through a really bad period right after graduation because you have this system where, kind of like what we've been hinting at, when you have a job or a professor or an assignment, there's no room for artist block. You just go. And the amount of work that students produce is mind-boggling. How, like, in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, you have 4 years of just focus on your art. And you just have to reconcile the fact that it's okay, nor it's not healthy to continue that after graduation. It's not healthy. You can't
keep that up.
Yeah, you can't, you'd be exhausted. So think of it like a boot camp. And no, you're never going to push yourself that hard again, but that's going to give you such a solid foundation to continue forward.
I mean, the way I think about it is art school to me, or university, wherever you're studying, is like sprints. Like, you just run as fast as you can, like crazy. There's no time to think. You just got to get there, and then you can collapse, right? You go home, break, do whatever you want, come back, do the sprint again. I would die if I did a sprint like that. I got to get 6 hours of sleep because otherwise I'm a horrible grouch the next day. I can't function. And so you learn to pace yourself. I think that's what's different about being in school, is that you can crash and burn. But like, Jordan, I think for you, that was not an option. You couldn't crash and burn. Like, you had to make sure you still had juice left, right? In your graduate school process. Yeah,
definitely. Because just life still happens when I'm tired or when I don't feel like doing this drawing. And if people need something done, you want the way I try to live my life, I try and give everybody 100% as much as I possibly can. And if I can't, then I pretty much let them know at the beginning, like, hey, I'm tired, so leave me alone for a little bit. I'll be okay after a while. And so when it comes to just dealing with all those things, part of what keeps me going is I love what I do so much that I almost don't even realize how tired I am. Like, there have literally been times where I'm sitting in this very chair that I'm in right now, and I fall asleep at my desk, and it's like 5 in the afternoon, you know, or 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm just knocked out because I've been working on it so much, and I just really enjoy what I do. And there have been times where I would literally, it's partially my fault, where I would be running late on assignment and I would be drawing for literally 24 hours, which I do not recommend. It's awful. And my wrist hurts and I'm falling asleep in class and everything. And then I go home, and if I have just the tiniest bit of juice left, I still draw. Like, like that's just how I'm wired now. And so I don't put that on everybody, but that's just how I am.
Speaking of drawing from life, I love this comment from B-Dog Booze. I draw from life when I get artist block. It keeps you drawing something new. gives you ideas while you're doing it. I think that's fabulous because some of you guys I know have been watching my live drawing streams where I just get some Robert Mapplethorpe photos and we talk about anatomy and all those great things. And I'll tell you, those live drawing streams for me, they're so fun because I'm like, okay, it's not for a deadline. It's not for a show. I'm teaching. And if I mess up this drawing, who cares? It's a good learning opportunity for the students to see that, look, not everybody makes great work all the time. And so I love those streams because it's so little pressure. I know that sounds weird because some people would be like, oh, but you're streaming live. Isn't that a lot of pressure? I'm like, no, because who am I trying to please, right? like Alex, I have this one picture of you. You probably don't even remember. It was you, me, and Casey, and we were in a forest shooting B-roll. Like we weren't even doing anything that exciting. And you drew this little pen drawing of one of those maple propeller seed
I
things.
remember that. Yeah.
Do you
remember that day well.
Like,
yeah.
Like, why did you do that? Like, that was not a deep moment for you. Oh, maybe it was. I don't know.
No, I mean, I think it's the same example of what we've been talking about where it was that thing. I get intimidated drawing in nature because it's like, go out, it's like, cool, draw. And I love going outside. I love hiking and walking. And so it becomes one of those topics that's too big for me to handle. So it's like, okay, just pick a small thing, then just draw that. Like, just don't let yourself not draw something.
Seven Angelic says, what about indecision paralysis, where you do 50 thumbnails, you can't choose which direction to go in, so you do none of them? Well, Jordan, I know you probably had 50 thumbnails for every character, if not more, but that is really hard when you have so many options. How do you figure out which one to pick?
Yeah, so I'll use the example of my character since Clara so graciously brought it up. So there was actually a project where the assignment was do 50 thumbnails of a character. And what it ultimately came down to is what tells the story the most and what do I find most fun. And sometimes it's just down to taste, you know? So if I have 50 thumbnails of a character, what I'll do is I'll go, I don't like the pants on 4, but I like the arms on 35, and I like the hair on 6, and I'll just like kind of mishmash them all together and build off of that. And so it's basically just a process of elimination. That's how I would treat it.
I guess Justin is very impressed by 6 hours of sleep.
I'm so glad you put that comment because you said 6 hours. I was like, what?
I can't sleep more than that. I feel crazy if I sleep 10 hours. I know, Jordan, you can sleep forever. You're like Mr. Sleeping Beauty, basically. Right? I don't know. I just got things to do. You know, if I sleep too much, I won't get anything done.
I wish I could do that, but I just can't. I've tried it and I keep trying it, and it's not enough for me. Yeah, I need a solid 8.
I feel like I train myself to sleep on just about any amount. Like there have been I can go anywhere from no sleep to 11 hours, and I have to make it work in anywhere between.
We have a comment from ComCuke. I like drawing my favorite facial features of celebrities I like when I can't think of anything to draw. I love that because, you know something? I have a lot of students, they say to me in this almost guilty voice, I really like to draw fan art. And I'm like, so it's fine. If it feels good, do it. And I think they think I'm going to judge them and say, oh no, never make fan art. That's going to poison your artistic. I'm like, you like it, do it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, so many people do fan art. Like, Jordan, have you done fan art lately?
Once or twice, yes.
Alex, there's got to be some guilty pleasure that you draw, right?
And honestly, this got me out of my last artist hiatus. Like my long period of artist block was I started playing D&D with some friends and like sketching friends' characters. And they weren't elaborate drawings. They weren't paintings, but just friends were like, hey, that's pretty cool. Can I get one? I'm like, yeah, here you go. And it was the first time in a long time art was fun. And so if fan art or celebrity pics, then actually with that comment, this was years ago, an illustrator named Chad Gowie, he did for Mustache March, he did famous celebrity mustaches. And so it was such a small, simple product, but it looked so good.
That's hilarious.
I mean, if it makes you happy, I think
Yeah.
that's what
And
matters.
they were beautiful, like well done ink drawings of just like Freddie Mercury's mustache. It was perfect.
Neil is saying I should draw Benedict. I'm going to disagree with you, Neil, because I'd much rather look at Benedict. Because, you know, if you look at Benedict, you just look at him. You don't have to do anything. Like, there's none of that, like, artistic struggle that's happening. It's just way more fun just to look at him. It's fine. We have a comment from your spirit guide. Sometimes I feel like if I'm not working, not painting, not learning something new, I'm wasting my time, and it gets worse during art blocks. How do you guys deal with something like this? What would you do, Jordan? Because that is really frustrating.
Yeah, that's tough. I guess it first off depends on what kind of artist you are. There are some people who do this as more of a career, and then there's some people who just do it for fun or as a hobby. So weighing things out that way is, you know, I feel like if it's not necessary, don't put that sort of pressure on yourself, first of all. Because if you're not trying to figure out how to pay bills, then why stress? You know, it's just something you do on the side. Sure, learn whatever pace you feel like it, and you know, no one's depending on your work to create rent money. But if for someone who's a student or someone who's making a career out of this, I think you have to give yourself permission to take breaks. I think this question sounds like someone who's like worried about like, how do I keep myself from being overworked and overwhelmed and things like that. And you just have to take breaks sometimes. You have to chill out, go sit, you know, by the pool and, you know, read a book that you like or something like that. And when you allow yourself that time to rest and get those creative juices flowing again, I think you won't have as much of a problem. Now, as far as the learning thing, I find that we should always be learning just in general. Like, even if it's not actively searching up, you know, books to read or videos to watch, I think life is just all about learning stuff. So it could just be in passing or whatever, but as long as you're still learning, then I think you're going to be fine. I don't think there's really, I mean, I hope you don't stop learning. Put it like that. That's my life is.
Well, and I don't know that you can say that just because a drawing didn't come out the way you wanted it to, and you don't see it as a success, that it's a waste of time. Because some of the most important pieces that I did as an art student were the pieces where I fell on my face and totally screwed up and got destroyed at critique. And if anything, I said to myself, Clara, never do that again. That was a bad idea, right? And so I don't think that you should give yourself that kind of pressure, because I have times when I'm drawing and it's just kind of boring. I mean, I wish I could tell you guys it's all like inspirational, but it's not. Some days you're just doing that for a little while. I mean, Alex, you do those intricate gouache paintings, and I watched you paint the one of Sleepy Hollow, and there's this one point you were just like tracing around the edges. I mean, that can't be that inspiring, is it? I don't know.
No, it's like you just have to get those moments, and like what Jordan was saying of just don't stop learning in everyday moments. It's like, I love this concept in the sci-fi book Dune, where it just says you learn from every experience. Like, it's not a choice whether you learn from it or not. Like, you are actively learning. So yeah, if you feel like you're not moving forward or not even learning new ideas, like, don't worry, because you are. Like, you're perceiving things, you're getting learning.
We have a super chat from Darshi De Silva. Thank you so much for your support. As a lot of you know, Art Prof is 100% free. We rely entirely on donations. So any amount you guys can do to help us is so wonderful. Thank you so much for that support. Maria is saying, I feel like when I stop drawing for a day to study French or learn about random things, I go back to my illustrations with a healthier mind. Yeah, like, how do you feel after you watch Spider-Man, Jordan?
I feel really excited. And honestly, I listen to the music for it, and I look at the art books, and I just have so much fun with it. And when I watch particularly Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I look at it and I go like, the crew looks like they had a lot of fun making this film. And if I can achieve that same feeling through my own work, then I feel like I succeeded, you know? But anyway, speaking of getting the creative juices flowing, we want to introduce something to you guys. We have a new Art Prof podcast available on Spotify, where we have all these different discussions that we have that you guys can enjoy and listen to. And after the stream, hopefully that you'll join us on the Discord at about 5 or 10 minutes in the post live streams channel, where you guys can ask us more questions and get more insight from us. And also, please subscribe to our channel and join the Art Prof family, and click on the bell for notifications. And last but not least, we want to thank everyone who is a Patreon supporter. You guys are so awesome, and we can do none of this stuff without you. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And the rest of you guys, hope you have the great rest of your day, and see you next time. Take care.